Canada would join the US tariffing China on more goods. Would Canada be open to that?
So we already have tariffs that are imposed on key components that are coming from China, and including also electric vehicles. When it comes to the US and their own concerns, we're able to have conversations. We are very open to have also trade related conversation, including when it comes to China. And so I'm convinced that I will be able to have these conversations with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and also the Minister of Finance, Dominic LeBlanc, will be able to talk to Scott Bessent about it. But fundamentally, what we have said to the Trump administration is we will never accept any form of tariffs against us. And if tariffs are against us, we will fight back. And we are the only country on the planet that has said we will come up with $155 billion worth of tariffs and a first tranche of $30 billion, which is actually of listed goods. Yeah. What we've learned through all these different conversations and negotiations is we need to engage, and we'll continue to do that in a very pragmatic way. And that's why I was speaking with Lindsey Graham this morning. That's why I'm in contact with Marco Rubio, and many of my colleagues are doing that same work. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, we know that the deal will be struck between the Prime Minister and the President. And that's why we need to make sure that we get all that information. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, the only deal is between the President and the Prime Minister. So when we are having conversations with the Americans, we know that any other subject can be on the table. But the main subjects that are on the table are the ones presented by the President.
Minister, BC's Premier and opposition leader have raised the idea of taxing thermal coal, which comes in by rail from the United States and is shipped out of BC's Delta port. Thermal coal exports, of course, are under federal jurisdiction. So would the federal government support this proposal to tax thermal coal?
We've said it many times, everything is on the table. I'm having a conversation and a meeting with Premier Eby, leaving you wonderful people. And I'm open to have that conversation. I think that what we're seeing right now in the US is Americans are tuning in to the fact that tariffs would be bad for them because they would create inflation. They would have it would have an impact at the pump. It would have an impact when they go to for the groceries. It will have an impact on home heating. And so we don't want tariffs. We said clearly it is bad for. We don't want a trade war. We will never launch one. But of course, if there are decisions that are taken by the White House, we will retaliate, we will react. So that's why, meanwhile, we're having conversations about the security of the border. That's why we're here, Parm and I. But that's also why we need to prepare and make sure that everything is on the table.
Do you have any more clarity from the Trump administration what could get them to back off of the tariffs? Specifics? These conversations that are happening, whatever you can share with the public, because there's a lot of confusion.
I've said in the past when asked that question, I'm not in the headspace of President Trump. So, and I think none of us here and no one in the world is. But our goal is to engage, is to gather information while understanding that there's so many jobs at home that are affected by this. So many families across the country that are anxious about this. So that's why we'll keep on fighting. And meanwhile, that's why as the head of the diplomacy here in Canada, I'll be engaging every single day, every hour of the day to make sure that Canadians' interests are defended.
Follow up, so far have you gotten specifics, or do they just say you've got to tighten up the border and it's to Canada to just kind of guess as to what they want? Or are you, so far, has there been any specific things from the U.S. government that they say they'd like to see?
So just to give context, there are 3 executive orders under which we are and other countries as well. So the first one is linked to the security of the border, and that's why we're doing the job. We invested $1.3 billion in a very good plan to protect our border, and we'll continue to present the data, the facts, to the White House. But I think also we have to remember that Canadians have leverage. Why? Because we're the biggest client of the United States. We buy more from the Americans than China, Japan, the UK, and France all together. So when we say buy local to Canadians, use your consumer power, use your power when you're at the grocery store, or if you're a business leader, when you decide who are your different people that you will be working with, to make sure that you buy Canadian, to reinforce each other. So it's not as if, we don't have an impact on this. We do. So that's my first point. Second executive order is linked to aluminum and steel. That is affecting every country that is exporting aluminum and steel to the US. So we need to make sure that we fight back, and I've been to Europe over the past 2 weeks, working with the Germans, the Brits, the French, and also the EU to make sure that we have the same counter-tariffs measures affecting businesses in America. And thirdly, there is a third executive order that is linked to reciprocal tariffs, and that is coming up on April 1st. And that's the will of the White House to make sure that there are different deals with all the different trading partners that the Americans have in the world. And so when you hear reciprocal tariffs from the president, it is linked to that third executive order. So my point is the Americans are putting a lot on the table in order to try to negotiate. Our goal will, at every single negotiation table, will be to defend Canadians' interests.
Canada exploring a legal case against the use of the USMCA, just given the effects that these tariffs on something really have on investment business?
We have a very broad strategy. It is involving many different strategies, but I won't negotiate in public.
Next question, please. Do you have an end game if there's a trade war? How long can Canada hold out against a much larger, much stronger nation? And if we're fighting tariff after tariff after tariff, what's the end game?
2 comments on that. First, the only ones that will be able to have an impact on President Trump for him to change course are the Americans themselves. No country is able to convince the American people more than Canadians. We're the closest country on the planet to the Americans, and we have family, friends, etc. So we know the Americans, and we know that we can convince them to make sure that they put pressure on the White House. Second, we're over-reliant on the US. We know it. It is a moment that is pivotal in the history of our country. We need to get rid of internal barriers between provinces and territories. It is a real problem that in Canada it is easier to send products and export services to the US than east-west. We have to change our mindset. We have to seize this opportunity, and that's what we'll do.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.